So we're here to talk about whether or not we should celebrate the birth of baby 7 billion or don sackcloth and ashes and rip out our beards in fear of baby number 7 billion. And I think it's probably clear to all of you that my position is that there's plenty of room on God's green earth for all of us, including baby 7 billion. In fact, we're in a celebratory mood at PRI. We baked a chocolate cake, and we're going to be cutting the cake tonight and singing happy birthday to baby, the little guy or little girl, as the case may be. If it were true that 7 billion people were a bad thing for the rest of us, you would expect certain things to be happening. You would expect lifespans to be shortening. You would expect per capita food consumption to be going down. You would expect healthcare to be deteriorating. You would expect infant mortality rates to be going down. Instead, we see all those indicators increasing. We see lifespans now, according to the World Health Organization, at 69 years. That is a new milestone. And in fact, if you look at the chart going back some decades, you will see continual increases as our population has grown from 3 billion in 1960 to, in 1999, 6 billion to 7 billion. We have seen continual increases in lifespans around the world. Per capita food consumption also shows the same trend. The more of us there are, the more prosperous we have become. Infant and child mortality rates are down, not up. As recently as 100 years ago, something like 4 out of 10 of all children died before the age of 5. Now the under 5 death rate is less than 5, about 5% and falling. So all these indicators indicate that we're actually doing better with more people than we were doing with fewer people. So overpopulation cannot be true as a thesis of how population growth affects humanity. We have never been as well off, we have never been as prosperous as we are now. Now, when you make these arguments, the other side then says, okay, fine, so human beings are doing well, but other species are suffering. The planet is suffering. How do you account for that? Well, as population grows, of course, we do place increasing demands on the environment, but we also create the kind of prosperity we need to solve the problems that are, in fact, created by our numbers. And so as our prosperity grows, we're able to set aside the resources that we need to solve the problems caused by our numbers. Let me give you an example of that. Right now, there's a lot of concern about the whale population. There are international treaties that have been signed protecting the whales. There are covenants, fishing agreements that have been agreed to by Japan and other countries, limiting the taking of numbers of different species. And yet whale populations are in trouble. And the population controllers, the people who believe there are too many people on the planet, say, for that reason, we need to reduce the number of babies born in the world. Well, I don't see what the one has to do with the other. I don't see what reducing the number of children born in China or in Rwanda has to do with increasing the whale population. I will tell you what you have to do as an oceanographer. I was in oceanography for some years. What you have to do to increase the whale population is you have to enforce existing covenants. You have to rein in the corrupt Japanese fishing industry, and you have to stop the overfishing of the population. If you did that, the whale population would rebound. Now, no one suggests that you can restore the whale population by forcing down the Japanese birth rate, right? Doesn't make sense. Even though the Japanese consume all of the whales that they take, we don't say that the Japanese population should be reduced in order to save the whales. Instead, we say something even more nonsensical. We say that the population of Africa should be reduced. The birth rate in Latin America should be reduced in order to save the whale population. You can use the same kind of argument. You will see the same kind of argument made over and over again, that to protect some species or to protect some aspect of the environment, you have to reduce human population growth. But the one does not equate to the other. There are always intermediate solutions that do not involve reducing the numbers of people. Now, in the lead up to baby 7 billion, the Chinese government specifically has been celebrating the fact that it has eliminated 400 million people from its population. And it claimed that without China's one-child policy, the population of the world would have reached 7 billion 5 years ago. Well, that may be true. I agree with the Chinese Communist Party that they have eliminated 400 million people from the Chinese population. But the real question is this: by eliminating 400 million of the most productive, enterprising, hardworking, entrepreneurially minded people in the world, has China made itself richer or has China made itself poorer? Human beings are the ultimate resource, the one resource you cannot do without. There have been for some years shortages, labor shortages in China's coastal provinces. Workers are in short supply. There will now be, it's projected, a nationwide labor shortage in China beginning next year or the year after, precisely because they have eliminated 400 million people from their population. I believe that China has shortchanged the Chinese people. It has made China and thus the world poorer by eliminating 400 million people. And the same argument can be used against population control efforts elsewhere. Today we see Greek rioting. Greece is in riots. Greeks are rioting. Look at the rioters. They're overwhelmingly middle-aged and elderly. The real reason they're rioting is because there are too few young Greeks entering the workforce, paying taxes, and helping to keep government expenditures within bounds and helping to keep pension funds afloat. They have, in effect, eaten their seed corn. They have reduced their birth rate in Greece so low that the growing population of elderly now is demanding things from the government that the government no longer has the tax revenues to supply. This is ultimately a demographic question. The current world recession has come about in part because of declining birth rates in Europe and Japan and other countries, cutting into productivity, cutting into tax revenues, and making what would have been a manageable situation much, much worse. So we're grateful that baby 7 billion has come into the world. We believe that baby 7 billion, red or yellow, black or white, Chinese or Latino or African, is not a liability but an asset, not a curse but a blessing. Humanity's long-term problem is not going to be too many children, but too few children. And when I say that, I have to close by making reference to certain UN Population Fund projections, which I believe are completely misleading. The UN Population Fund, in the lead-up to the day of 7 billion, produced a graph which shows population increasing like this, growing indefinitely into the future. What we really believe is going to happen, what demographers believe is going to happen, is that the population is going to peak around mid-century and then begin to decline. That is the most accurate projection that we know of because it is simply an extrapolation of the numbers that we currently see. If we assume that people are going to continue to behave in the future the way they behave right now, then population will peak in 2040 at a little over 8 billion and then begin to decline. If we assume that birth rates in places like Greece and Italy and Spain and China go back up to 2.1 children, then the population will still peak, but it will peak later in the century around 2080 or 2090. But China shows no indication of abandoning the one-child policy. The Greeks and the Spaniards and the Italians show no indication that they're suddenly going to re-embrace marriage and childbearing and raise their birth rate up from 1.1, 1.2, 1.3 back up to 2.1. So if you imagine those things are going to happen, you're projecting a scenario that, in my view, is quite unlikely. And then you have the really scary scenario where population increases to 15 billion. How can that happen? That could only happen if the decline in fertility rates completely reverses itself and we see a baby boom. There are no indications with urbanization, modernization, rising levels of education that that's going to happen either. So our long-term problem, to come back to the point, is not going to be too many children, but too few children. Why should we, the United States, be spending $1 billion on population control programs to hasten the day that populations age and die, to lower already falling birth rates even further? In a time of fiscal austerity, what sense does it make for us to be exporting abortion, sterilization, and contraception around the world to make a bad problem worse? I argue that it makes no sense at all. So today we celebrate this baby is being born into the world that has never been more prosperous, where it has never had better chances for a long and healthy life at an increasing standard of living than today. Thank you.